Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Sally's disaster warning, Mariah and Daniel's covert meeting. As Sally Spectra issues a calamity warning, Mariah Copeland and Daniel Romalotti Jr. will meet in secret. The weekly ad for Y&R begins with Mariah meeting Daniel at the park overlook and questioning whether he fulfilled her request. Tessa is unaware of my presence. In the promo video, Daniel affirms, "I didn't tell her." If Mariah still intends to go to the facility in Boston, she might want Daniel to monitor Tessa because she will reportedly need his help. Mariah may not have revealed any additional information off-screen, despite telling Tessa that she had attempted to kill a guy. Since Mariah is still harboring secrets, including this one now that she will be meeting with Daniel to talk about it, Tessa might become frustrated once more. Will Daniel eventually come clean and update Tessa on this secret encounter with Mariah? Regarding Sally, she will inform Diane Jenkins Abbott of some unsettling information. When Diane inquires about the well-being of Jason Thompson's character Billy Abbott, Sally will acknowledge that he is not and caution him that he is on the verge of making the most significant mistake of his life. If Billy makes a deal with Kane and consents to deploy the AI software for Victor Newman's takedown, he could make a huge mistake. Kane will be upset if Billy alters the plan to his own and would expect Billy to fulfill his commitment. Billy intends to leverage the threat posed by this program to obtain what he desires from Victor, namely control over Chancellor and the funds necessary to maintain Abbott communications. That is, Billy might take over the AI program and decide not to carry out the portion about destroying Victor. Billy looks to be able to quickly establish himself as the enemy number one by threatening Victor and tricking Kane. It's understandable why Sally will feel frantic. However, when Kane meets Billy on his train, he will have his formal agreement on the table. Kane will ask Billy how long he has dreamed of defeating Victor, and he will suggest that all Billy needs to do is accept so that Newman Enterprises may be dismantled. Sally and Diane bond, Daniel's dilemma, and Mariah and Daniel's secret. It depicts a covert meeting between Daniel Romalotti, Jr. and Mariah Copeland. Additionally, Courtney Hope's character Sally Spectra develops a bond with Susan Walters' character Diane Jenkins Abbott. Let's discuss the upcoming events in the CBS soap opera as you continue reading. The private meeting of Mariah Copeland. Mariah has a meeting with Daniel, so let's start with her. The two of them meet at the park in the promo footage. Did Daniel do what she asked? The redhead asks. Tessa Porter is unaware that they are now meeting, but the man affirms that he did. What did Mariah do to that man? Could she tell Daniel? Or might she have a different kind of request? The moral conundrum of Daniel Romalotti, Jr. Given that this has to do with Tessa, Mariah is obviously turning to Daniel. The redhead said that in order to manage her mental health, she is attending to a clinic. Aria Porter Copeland already sensed that Mariah wasn't with her, which infuriated Tessa. The young child is perplexed as to what has changed with her mother and feels something is up. The preview film also depicts Sally visiting the Abbott manse, according to spoilers for the week of September 15th on The Young and the Restless. The redhead probably wants to discuss ways to save Billy Abbott with Jack Abbott. But it doesn't seem like Jack is at home. Sally therefore gives an honest response when Diane asks her if everything is okay. Jack's wife is informed by the redhead that Billy is not feeling well. He is going to commit the greatest error of his life. Kane Ashby's influence. He will meet with Billy to go over the proposal with Kane Ashby. Sally is adamantly opposed to it, but Billy is ready to accept Kane's offer. How long have you dreamed about taking down Victor Newman, Eric Braden? The tycoon asks Billy. All you need to do now is accept, and Newman Enterprises can be dismantled. Despite Billy's apparent willingness to accept the offer, I question whether he will ultimately emerge victorious. Victor would have to treat Billy slightly better than he has in the past if he were to save the Newman family's companies. The week in Genoa City is shaping up to be one of tangled secrets, looming betrayals, and warnings that could shift the balance of everything that's been building. And it all begins with Sally Spectra sounding the alarm about a storm she sees coming while Mariah Copeland and Daniel Romalotti Jr. find themselves locked in a clandestine meeting that could put everything Mariah has been working to keep under wraps at risk, because while Tessa Porter remains blissfully unaware that her wife is sneaking around to confer with Daniel, the weight of Mariah's concealed actions, Her admission that she once attempted to kill a man and the lingering paranoia that someone will discover the truth now hangs between her and Daniel like a ticking time bomb that could explode in both of their faces at any moment, especially if Daniel lets his conscience get the better of him and runs to Tessa with the truth about this secret meeting, a betrayal that would devastate Mariah, not only because it would fracture her marriage but because it would raise dangerous questions about why she needed Daniel's help in the first place, why she insisted on secrecy, and whether Tessa, or anyone else, could ever really trust her again. As Mariah leans in at the park overlook, her voice low and urgent, she presses Daniel on whether he followed through with what she asked, and his steady response, "I didn't tell her," reassures her for a moment, but beneath that calm exterior Daniel is wrestling with his own storm, torn between protecting Mariah's fragile trust and knowing that Tessa deserves the truth, because if she discovers this betrayal on her own, the fallout could be nuclear. Meanwhile, Sally Spectra is on her own mission, and hers involves a warning that may prove to be just as destructive, because after stepping into the Abbott mansion and finding Diane Jenkins Abbott instead of Jack, Sally doesn't hold back her concerns. She blurts out that Billy Abbott isn't well, that he is standing on the edge of a catastrophic decision, and that if he goes through with it, he will be committing the biggest mistake of his life, a mistake that ties back to Kane Ashby's shadowy proposal and the AI program designed to take down Victor Newman, a scheme that could turn Billy into the most dangerous enemy in Genoa City overnight. Sally knows Billy's reckless side better than most, and she can see that he's ready to seize power even if it means burning every bridge in his path. But she also knows that if he crosses Kane and tries to twist the plan to his own ends, using the AI to gain control over Chancellor and the financial freedom to prop up Abbott communications without delivering Victor's destruction as promised, then he will not only ignite Victor's fury but also earn Kane's vengeance, making himself a target from both directions. Sally's desperation is palpable as she pleads with Diane to understand the gravity of what Billy is walking into. But whether Diane can rein him in is another matter entirely, because Billy, as always, is intoxicated by the idea of outmaneuvering Victor, by the possibility of finally stepping out from under his shadow and rewriting the balance of power in Genoa City. Kane, however, isn't the type to let a deal slide, and when he sits across from Billy with the formal agreement on the table, his words drip with a mixture of temptation and menace. "How long have you dreamed of taking Victor down? All you need to do now is accept, and Newman Enterprises can be dismantled." A siren's song that plays directly into Billy's long-held grudges and insecurities, leaving Sally's frantic warning echoing like thunder in the distance, unheard by the man determined to play with fire. Back at the park, Daniel's moral dilemma deepens, because while he wants to be a loyal friend to Mariah, he can't ignore the gnawing voice inside reminding him that secrets like these don't stay buried forever, and when they surface, they destroy lives. Mariah's desperation is etched across her face as she insists that Daniel keep this between them, that Tessa doesn't need to know, that she's already struggling with the guilt of leaving Aria behind while she attends the facility in Boston for her mental health, and that if Tessa found out she was also hiding this dark past, an attempted killing, it would unravel everything they've built. Yet Daniel, for all his empathy, knows that secrets corrode relationships, and has seen firsthand how the truth always claws its way into the light in Genoa City. The preview hints at Daniel inching closer to a decision that could shift the ground beneath them all. Will he break his word to Mariah and confess to Tessa about their covert meeting, or will he bury the secret and live with the knowledge that he's complicit in hiding something that could tear apart not just Mariah's marriage but her entire future? Meanwhile, Sally's warning to Diane creates an unexpected bond between the two women, because for all their complicated history and occasional rivalries, both understand what it means to love someone who's perpetually on the brink of self-destruction. And in this shared understanding, a fragile alliance forms, one rooted in the hope of saving Billy from himself. But saving Billy has never been easy, and this time the stakes are higher than ever, because he's not just gambling with his own future, he's playing a game that involves Victor Newman, Kane Ashby, and the kind of technological weapon that could bring down entire empires. If Billy truly believes he can outsmart them both, he may soon find himself in deeper trouble than even Sally's disaster warning could predict. As the week unfolds, every thread tightens, Mariah's secret festers, Daniel's conscience wavers, Tessa's intuition sharpens, Sally's warning grows more urgent, Diane is caught in the crossfire of Abbott loyalties, Billy teeters closer to the abyss, and Kane presses harder for his revenge-fueled victory over Victor. It's a perfect storm of deception, ambition, and desperation. And by the time the dust settles, no one in Genoa City will be untouched. As the storm clouds of deceit and impending disaster continued to swirl over Genoa City, Mariah Copeland found herself replaying the Covert meeting in her mind long after leaving the park overlook, her stomach tightening as though each step she took carried her further into quicksand. Because while Daniel Romalotti Jr. had given her his word that Tessa remained in the dark, Mariah knew better than anyone that secrets had a way of unraveling themselves in this town, especially when emotions and divided loyalties were involved, and the doubt creeping into Daniel's eyes was a warning sign that he might not be able to carry this burden much longer. Every word he had spoken had been lined with tension, every pause too long, every reassurance a little too shaky, and deep down Mariah feared that the man she trusted to protect her confidences might soon become the very one to expose them. She had confided something unspeakable, an attempted killing that she hadn't shared with Tessa because she couldn't bear the thought of her wife seeing her as a monster. But now that Daniel knew, she was no longer the sole keeper of the truth, and that in itself was terrifying because trust, once fractured, was nearly impossible to piece back together. And if Daniel slipped, if even a hint of this got back to Tessa, not only would her marriage implode but the fragile stability she'd been clinging to since deciding to seek help in Boston would collapse entirely. Across town, Sally Spectra paced the Abbott mansion's sitting room after her unexpected conversation with Diane Jenkins Abbott, her fiery energy filling the space as she tried to impress upon Diane the urgency of the situation with Billy Abbott, who had once again plunged headlong into a scheme that threatened not just himself but everyone around him. Sally's voice trembled with a mixture of frustration and fear as she described how Billy was on the brink of sealing a deal with Kane Ashby, a deal that wasn't merely reckless but potentially catastrophic, because the AI software Kane had developed wasn't some harmless bargaining chip. It was a weapon, one powerful enough to destabilize Newman Enterprises and possibly even fracture the corporate ecosystem of Genoa City itself, leaving chaos in its wake. Diane, torn between her instinct to protect her son and her suspicion of Sally's motives, listened intently, her sharp eyes narrowing as she considered whether Sally's warning was driven by genuine concern for Billy or some residual attachment she hadn't fully buried. Yet despite her skepticism, Diane couldn't ignore the possibility that Sally was right, that Billy's compulsion to outmaneuver Victor Newman might blind him to the dangerous consequences of partnering with Kane, a man whose thirst for revenge ran so deep it could drown anyone foolish enough to tether themselves to him. Back in the park, Daniel wrestled with his conscience in the moments after Mariah's departure, his thoughts ricocheting between loyalty and honesty, between friendship and betrayal, because while Mariah's desperation had moved him, and while he empathized with the crushing weight of her guilt, he couldn't shake the image of Tessa's trusting eyes, of the way she would look at him if she ever found out he had kept something this explosive from her. Daniel had lived long enough to know that secrets festered, that they didn't stay hidden forever, and he wondered if by keeping Mariah's confidence he was actually setting Tessa up for even deeper heartbreak when the truth inevitably surfaced. The promo for the week teased just how precarious these dynamics were becoming, with Tessa already sensing that something was amiss, her maternal instincts flaring as little Aria Porter Copeland asked innocent but piercing questions about why her mother seemed distracted, absent, and unlike herself, and though Tessa tried to smooth over those worries with gentle reassurances, she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut that Mariah was holding something back yet again, a pattern that had scarred their relationship in the past and threatened to do so once more if it wasn't addressed head-on. Meanwhile, Billy Abbott sat across from Kane Ashby, the sleek contract between them practically glowing with temptation, Kane's smooth voice needling into the most vulnerable parts of Billy's psyche as he painted a picture of Newman Enterprises crumbling, of Victor Newman finally brought low, of Billy stepping out from the long shadow of his rival once and for all. It was everything Billy had fantasized about during sleepless nights filled with resentment and insecurity, and the thought of finally seizing that victory intoxicated him even as he felt the faint tug of Sally's warning echoing at the back of his mind. "How long have you dreamed of this?" Kane pressed, his grin sharp and knowing, and Billy hesitated only a moment before imagining the thrill of holding that power in his hands, of proving not just to Victor but to Jack, to the entire world, that he was capable of playing the biggest game and winning. Yet what Billy couldn't see, what Sally feared with every fiber of her being, was that Kane wasn't offering him freedom or triumph. He was laying a trap, one that Billy's arrogance and desperation might drive him straight into, and once he was inside, there would be no easy way out. Back at the Abbott mansion, Sally and Diane's conversation stretched late into the evening, Sally's words tumbling out in a rush as she admitted that she wasn't just afraid for Billy's future but for the collateral damage that would ripple outward if he went through with this. Because Billy wasn't thinking about Chancellor, about Abbott Communications, about the employees and families who would be caught in the fallout. He was thinking about revenge, about ego, about finally besting Victor, and, in doing so he was risking everything and everyone tied to him. Diane, who had spent so long trying to mend her own reputation and rebuild her relationships, felt a chill at the thought of her son barreling toward yet another self-inflicted disaster. And though she wasn't sure whether Sally's presence in Billy's life was a blessing or a curse, she couldn't deny that the redhead's urgency was genuine. Across town, Daniel finally made his way home, but sleep didn't come easily, because every time he closed his eyes he heard Mariah's trembling voice, saw the desperation in her expression, felt the weight of the secret she had forced him to carry, and he knew that he stood at a crossroads. Either he kept this to himself and risked his conscience eating away at him, or he told Tessa and risked betraying Mariah in a way that could shatter their friendship forever. For Mariah, the hours stretched into an endless blur as she tried to steady herself for Boston, tried to convince herself that Daniel would remain silent, tried to block out the creeping dread that Tessa's intuition would lead her straight to the truth before she was ready to face it. And as she looked into her daughter's eyes, she felt the crushing guilt of knowing that one day Aria might learn what her mother had done, what she had tried to bury, and she wondered whether she would be seen as a protector or a danger, as someone who fought for her family or someone who made choices that nearly destroyed it. The pieces were all in motion now, Sally's warning hanging over Diane like a storm cloud, Mariah's secret festering between her and Daniel, Billy's signature hovering over Kane's contract like a match about to be struck, and Victor Newman himself, still oblivious to the scheme building in the shadows but never one to be caught off guard for long. It was only a matter of time before every concealed truth, every reckless choice, every whispered warning came crashing into the open. And when it did, Genoa City would once again be reminded that nothing stays hidden forever, not love, not lies, not betrayal, and certainly not disaster. The following day in Genoa City dawned deceptively calm, sunlight spilling across the park benches where Mariah and Daniel had met only hours earlier. But beneath that brightness the undercurrents of secrecy and betrayal churned darker than ever, for Mariah's steps felt heavier as she went about her morning, haunted by the possibility that Daniel might not keep his silence as steadfastly as he promised, and though she tried to present a veneer of normalcy for Tessa and Aria, she could feel the cracks forming in her facade every time Tessa studied her a little too closely, every time Aria asked an innocent question that cut too deep. Questions like "Why are you sad, Mommy?" that pierced straight through her carefully constructed mask. Meanwhile Daniel paced the art studio with restless energy, his phone burning in his pocket like a lifeline he couldn't bring himself to use, debating whether one call to Tessa would relieve him of the unbearable weight of Mariah's secret or ruin everything. And though he told himself that he was just being a good friend by keeping silent, he also knew that silence could become complicity if the truth one day exploded into the open. Across town, Sally tried to steady her nerves with a strong cup of coffee, but the warning she had delivered to Diane the night before replayed in her head on a relentless loop, and though she had no way of knowing whether Diane would act on it, she knew deep in her gut that Billy was in more danger than he realized, because Kane Ashby wasn't a man who offered partnerships, he offered traps. And Billy was too intoxicated by the thought of finally conquering Victor Newman to see the snare tightening around his ankle. Sally's instincts screamed that if Billy signed that contract, he would be condemning himself not only to Victor's wrath but also to Kane's inevitable betrayal, a double-edged disaster that could unravel the Abbotts and shake the entire corporate landscape of Genoa City. At the Abbott estate, Diane sat alone in the quiet drawing room, staring out the window as she weighed her next move, her heart torn between a mother's need to protect her son and a woman's understanding that Billy had to face the consequences of his reckless choices. But the image of Sally's earnest expression, the urgency in her voice, gnawed at her, because Diane knew all too well what it meant to ignore a warning until it was too late. And somewhere across town, Kane sharpened his strategy, replaying his conversation with Billy in his mind and savoring the anticipation of victory, convinced that the moment Billy's signature hit the page, Newman Enterprises would be poised for collapse, leaving Kane in control of the very power he had dreamed of wielding for years. What none of them realized, however, was that Victor Newman himself was already moving pieces on his own chessboard, watching